How's it going, everyone? David from dodmedia, home of tutorials and tips for photographers and filmmakers, gear reviews, and monthly giveaways. Today I want to talk about a subject that I've been meaning to talk about for a while now, and it's a bit of a tricky subject because it involves money. Or more specifically, how I bring up money with clients and how I price myself as a filmmaker, so as a videographer, as an editor, and how I avoid ever getting myself into a pickle. Let's go. So let's say that you've shot for some friends, for some family, you've shot for free for some businesses to try and build up portfolio work, and now you're ready to start actually trying to make some money back on the lenses, the camera, the gear, the computer, the website, all of the stuff that you've invested your money in to be able to do that. Well, one of the best pieces of advice I ever took away from a Chase Jarvis video was don't undersell yourself. If you think your time's only worth $50, then the person you're pitching your idea to or your services to is probably not going to think you're worth their time. It's pretty sad to say, but people can be a little vapid, so value for money doesn't necessarily mean cheaper is better. There's a nice soft middle ground between being too expensive for what you offer and seeming too cheap for what you offer, and that middle ground is something that you have to find yourself. No one can really help you with that. You need to decide what your time is worth. All I can say is charge twice what you would need to cover yourself for a day. So that's your rent, your mortgage, your bills, your food expenses, your internet connection, your phone, your car, everything you need to live as you currently live right now. So let's say in terms of living expenses, you need $1,500 a month to live as you live now. That's $18,000 a year, which divided by 365 gives you a daily rate of about $50. So you want to double that as your minimum baseline. $100 minimum baseline if that is your living expense. That'll allow you to live your life as it is, pay your taxes, and save a little on the side to invest in new gear, in marketing for your business, or to just go on a nice holiday. Then when it comes to rates, some people like to offer an hourly rate for video work. I've done this in the past, and there's a reason I don't do it anymore. That reason being that you're ultimately always going to lose. Let's take an example. You have a shoot that's 2 hours and it takes an hour to get there. So you travel for an hour, you shoot for 2 hours, and then you come back an hour again. That's 4 hours. Now those 4 hours, it's about half a day. The problem is that you're not going to shoot realistically, you're not going to shoot in the rest of that day. So unless you're planning on fitting in some editing work as well, you've basically written off that day as a 4-hour day, and that's all the profit you're going to make on that day. On top of that, you need to count the hours that you're going to charge the client in the invoice, and that's inevitably going to lead to an argument about whether it was really 4 hours or was it 3 hours because the shoot started late or finished early or any of that. And it's a big headache, and it's not worth it. So as a default, I either try and charge a project rate, or if the client prefers, I charge a daily rate. And I let them know that I'm theirs for the entire day. It doesn't matter if the shoot's going to take 1 hour or 8 hours, I'm theirs. I'm not distracted by anything else. I'm not counting the hours until maybe the 8th hour, at which point that's kind of your day done. And if you want more than that, you're going to need to start adding on. But anyway, that is a basic day rate, an 8-hour day, and you're good to go. Now that day rate is always going to change, right? You're never going to be able to say, right, that's my day rate, that's what I'm charging, because some clients you might actually think you could charge a little bit more for the scale of the project. Some clients you're going to have to charge a little bit less. But it's important to have that baseline that you can say, bam, that is how much I charge, especially because via email, it's a bit easier. You have time to think about it. But when you're talking face to face to someone and they say, what's your rate? And you kind of go, it's 300, then they immediately see that you're not sure exactly what your rate is. You're not sure what value your services have. If you're able to give them a baseline rate like that, what's your daily rate? Bam, 500. Then they're like, oh, okay, cool. This person is confident. They know what they're doing. And the client needs to see confidence. If they're planning on investing money in you delivering something creative for them, they need to be confident that you can do it. So I have a baseline. Anyone asks, bam, 500. That's my baseline. It's going to fluctuate, sure. For example, one of my main clients is an ongoing client. I've been working with them for about 7 years now, and they hire me on an annual basis for a certain number of days, which is quite a high number of days in the year. And so I give them a 25% discount on my rate, just as a flat line, 25% off for every single day that I invoice, because they're bringing me repeated work. And the profit that I make from them on a daily basis might not be so big. But because they're giving me all of those days of work, that extended profit is actually much more beneficial for me in the long run. And I yield a much higher profit from them than I would if I was charging a higher price, which they couldn't afford to hire me for. Or if they couldn't justify it to their bosses that I am what's worth hiring, as opposed to the competition who might be $100 or $50 cheaper. So having a baseline figure to throw out as soon as a client asks you is going to give them confidence that you know what you're doing. This isn't your first rodeo. You know what your service is worth. And their reaction to that will also tell you if they're serious about this project or not. It'll show you if they want a quality product that they actually want to invest in, or if they're literally just looking for cheap labor. So that's for shooting. Then for editing, I offer a day rate, which is the same as my shooting rate. That way it's just one number I can throw out and it's easy. Or I offer a half day, which is 4 hours, which is 60% of the day rate. So it's a little bit more expensive for them to buy a half day than it is to buy a full day in terms of hours that go into it. Because I don't need to travel anywhere for editing. So if they only want me to edit for half a day, that means I have another half of a day that I can invoice another client for, that I can do other work on, or that I can make these videos with. And having your rates straightforward, simple, no kind of hidden prices is the best thing that you can do, because your client is inevitably going to have to justify the cost of your service to someone else, someone who holds the money, so a producer, their boss, finance officer, it doesn't matter. They're going to have to justify it to someone. If that someone's themselves, they're still going to have to justify it to themselves financially. So having all of your costs up front like that, no hidden little perks and costs and, oh, and by the way, there's 10% interest on that. No, just don't do that, because it's going to confuse them, which is going to result in pissing them off or pissing off their bosses. And then you're going to create tension with your client, and tension with the client is the last thing you want. All right. So as I mentioned, I prefer to try and offer a product rate, so a whole package rate. And for a project rate, I'll ask for a breakdown of what the client needs, or if I'm responding to an RFP or request for proposals, then they'll already have broken down everything that they want there, and they're literally just looking for the best bid, the best bang for the buck. Best bang for the buck, which doesn't necessarily mean cheaper. It means the best value for the money that they're going to be spending. And essentially for a project rate, all I'm doing is calculating how many days I think it's going to need for me to shoot and edit and deliver that product for them. And whether it's going to have to involve location fees, equipment fees, crew fees, talent fees, you name it. All of that will be added into that proposal. Now, say I think that it's going to take 5 days to deliver this product, and I charge $500 a day. That's going to be $2,500 for that project, right? Wrong. You're going to add on 25% on top of that, and that is going to be contingency, because a project will pretty much always, nearly always, go over a little bit past what you had projected. So having that already accounted for as a means that you can draw on, instead of having to go back to the client and say, actually, it's going to be a bit more expensive than we'd agreed. Clients do not like that. Nobody likes that. I hate that when people do that. It doesn't look good for you, and it can cause problems for the client, for whoever's signing off on that paycheck, whoever's signing off on that budget. So calculate how many days you will realistically need, and then add on 25% to that fee. And that should include your day rate. It should include your accommodation, your transport, your equipment hire, your staff, all of that. Literally everything that you think you're going to need to spend on for this project, you put it in that quote. All right, then you pitch it to them and they say, wow, that's cheap. And you then show them your show reel to remind them that, well, it might be a bit cheaper than they were expecting, but the quality is, proof is in the pudding. And that way you just remind them to focus on the quality rather than the price, in case they're one of those people that thinks that cheap is bad. They may also say, are you out of your mind? In which case you negotiate with them. You tell them, look, what can we do to make this project a little bit cheaper? Could we perhaps shoot on an A7 instead of a Red? Could we maybe green screen the talent onto the North Pole instead of having to fly them there and actually film them in the North Pole? Anything that can make the project cheaper. And that kind of falls to you to think about that, because you're the creative. I hate that term. You're the creative. So it's up to you really to figure out what solutions there are to make it cheaper for the client so that they're happy. Or you know what? They might just say, Okay, great. Love it. Let's go for it. So then you have the question of, do I need a contract? And contracts are tricky because it kind of depends on where you live. I know I wouldn't dream of doing anything without a contract in the US, but in the UK, I rarely ask a client to sign a contract. Part of the reason for that is that I make sure that I make absolutely everything super clear in the email exchange. So fees, deliverables, timing, schedule, all of that, I make it super clear so that they can't turn around and say, oh no, you didn't say you were going to do that. You didn't say it was going to take that long or cost that much. And if these negotiations happen face to face, I'll always send a kind of meeting minutes to them afterwards as a follow-up, just to confirm everything in writing that we talked about, that we agreed. And that way they approve that, the project goes ahead, and if they decide they don't want to pay me, I can nail them to the wall because I have it in writing with them agreeing. But luckily it's never had to come to that. I've never had to legally get involved in trying to get payment. The reason I do it this way is because a long time ago I did have a client who refused to pay after we had agreed over the phone that the edit was going to take a little bit longer than they had expected because they decided that it needed to be completely re-edited. And so I told them, right, well, this is what the extra days are going to cost you. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, okay. But then I didn't have any of that in writing, and I didn't have them in writing confirming my minutes, my notes that basically reiterated that in writing. So they said, sorry, we're not paying that extra bit on the invoice. We're paying what we had originally agreed, which is what we have in writing here. And I didn't have a contract and I didn't have anything else in writing. It was all verbal agreement. So it was their word against mine. And so I just had to kind of accept that that was my mistake. And from there I learned. So that's why I always make sure that it's in writing somewhere so that I can print that off. I can send it to them and say, I don't know what that is, but that's in writing. So as far as contracts go, it's really down to you if you think that you need to use one or not. And sometimes the client might want you to sign a contract or a non-disclosure agreement or anything. And again, it's up to you. Just make sure that you read the small print. Any client who gets offended from you wanting to read the small print is probably up to no good, so be wary. But if the client does want you to sign a contract, just remember it's as much to protect you as it is them. And if it's a legally binding document, then you can use that legally if you need to. But don't worry too much about that. Okay, the next thing is the burden of responsibility. So let's say that you've got the client to agree to the project length, which includes your 25% contingency, and it's all agreed in writing or as a contract. And then you realize that you haven't really broached the subject of what happens if the project goes over time and you need them to pay more. For example, the shoot day is a disaster and you need to reshoot the next day, so you need to pay for the gear, the talent, the location, your own time. Or say the first cut requires heavy changes because the client loved it, but they showed their boss, and their boss, who was out of the loop until then, hates it, and so it requires an extra couple of days of editing. You need to be certain that the client knows what to expect in this situation, and you need to know who the burden of responsibility falls on. If it's your fault that you only allocated 1 hour of shooting time for something that was clearly going to take about 5 hours, that's your fault for screwing up your scheduling. That burden falls on you, and so that cost should come out of that 25% that you budgeted for. That way you can pay everyone and everything involved without cutting yourself short either, hopefully. And if you do cut yourself short, well, let it be a mistake that you never repeat. However, if the delay is caused by the client, say, as I mentioned, the boss comes in and says, well, hang on, this is the first time I'm seeing this and I hate it and I want a complete re-edit. Well, then that's the situation where you can say to the client, that's fine, it's not a problem. Just so you know, though, we're going to be going over the allocated time that I quoted you for. It's the client's problem for not involving the person who is going to be making the decision earlier on and not wasting time. And in this situation, you want to make sure that you've clarified up front when you are making your agreement that if the project is to roll over past the time you've allocated for, you can say, look, it's no problem. It's just going to take an extra couple of days and this is the daily rate. You don't just want to spring this fee on them out of the blue because it's going to piss them off and you don't really want to piss off the client. So when you are negotiating, just make sure you state the following. Project X will take X days and will provide X deliverables. But if the project should exceed X days due to additional demands from the client, those changes will be assessed and charged at XYZ daily rate for the number of additional days expected for completion of project. It sounds super clunky, but trust me, if you've ever read a legal document, yeah, that's not clunky. And you might think it's overwhelming for the client to see so many terms and conditions thrown around where they end up paying you more money. But believe me, being honest and upfront with them from the start is always better than trying to throw that at them later unexpectedly without them knowing how they're going to afford that. You just have to decide if the burden's going to fall on you or on them. If you think it's going to fall on you, let them know that you'll swallow that cost. They'll thank you for it. If you think that it's going to fall on them, just make sure you've been clear from the start what that additional cost would be, and they'll thank you for that too. Invoicing. So you're done with your shoot, you've edited and exported a final cut for the client to approve. There are a number of ways that you can go about closing the project. Some people ask for 50% as a deposit up front before they even start shooting, and then the remaining 50% at the end. Some people ask for a full payment before handing over the final file. Personally, I do neither. I send the final deliverable to the client, I ask them if they would like the invoice posted or emailed as a PDF, and I give them a short breakdown of what all of the expenses on the invoice are, just as a little refresher, a little reminder. I write on the invoice above my bank details that the payment needs to be made within 4 weeks, and after 4 weeks, it will start accruing a 1.5% interest rate per day. Then I mark in my calendar when I sent that invoice. I set a little reminder for 4 weeks' time to check if the invoice has been paid, and if it hasn't, I contact the client to remind them that the payment is due. And then if the payment hasn't been made within a week of that, I'll contact them again, and this time tell them that the payment is overdue and has started accruing a 1.5% daily interest rate, and will continue to do so until the invoice gets paid. And I make sure I do all of this within the same chain of emails that I've been interacting with them so far, so that they see that all of this is written down, all of this is catalogued. They can't try and pull a fast one on me because I have written proof that we have interacted on this, that we've agreed to this. Now, if payment is late and they end up making it like 2 months after, you'll never see that interest that was made on the 1.5 daily interest rate. The point of that is a kind of a scare tactic to get them to make the original payment quickly. So if you do that, don't expect that interest. It's a device to put a bit of fire under their asses. But that's just how I do it, and I've been doing that as a learning curve really for the past 10 years, and I've really rarely had any problems. But if you're not comfortable doing that, it's absolutely fine to ask for a deposit up front. It's absolutely fine to watermark your footage before you deliver the final file so that you get payment and then you deliver the final file. You can watermark it with draft, you can watermark it with do not use or your logo, anything that'll prevent the client from being able to just kind of throw it out into the wild and start using it before they've paid you. But as I say, I've never had to take legal action or anything like that, and the times where there was a misunderstanding was pretty much because of poor communication on my part. So that burden of responsibility fell on me. It was just an expensive lesson for me to learn. All right, and finally, a question I get asked a lot, and I answered it sort of quickly in one of my last videos, is should I work for free? And my answer is yes. If you're just starting out and you don't have any showreel material and you don't have a portfolio, no one's really realistically going to hire you based on your word. You need visual proof that you can actually create something that they want to pay for. So you'll more than likely need to shoot for free in the beginning, and you should try and enjoy that, because that's when you can try things. When you're shooting for free, you can make mistakes. You can try different things that you wouldn't normally dare try in case they go wrong, because it's a fun learning process when you're doing that. And it's really where you learn what works and what doesn't. Now, let's say you do usually get paid for video work, not necessarily very much, or quite a bit. Who knows? But a client asks you to do it for free because it'll give you great exposure, and all of their friends will hire you, and they'll hire you again, and blah, blah, blah. I say, sorry, these are my daily rates. Take them or leave them. I don't know if it's coincidence or not that clients who ask you to work for free are generally the ones who are going to push you the hardest and be the most unruly with you. They will treat you like crap and expect so much from you. And I can't stand that. So if they offer you great exposure and definite future work, just run. Just don't even interact with them. However, let's say that it's a project you'd really like to work on because it would be an awesome project to be a part of, or the client just really genuinely doesn't have the budget to pay you. This happens all the time with big events where all of the budget is put into planning the event, and then they completely forget about covering the event. And they don't have enough budget to hire the photographers, the filmmakers, everything that they need to actually document that event ever happened. Well, that's a call that you need to make for yourself. If you think it'll be a fun thing to do, a rewarding thing to do in terms of good showreel material, good networking, or if it's just for a good cause, then really that's down to you to decide. But it's certainly not something you should just blanket say no to. And it's usually pretty easy to tell the difference between clients who genuinely want to hire you but can't afford to, and clients who can afford to hire you but literally just want what you can offer for free. All right, and finally, I just want to remind you, in case this video kind of drowned it out a little bit, making films and videos for a living is a privilege, and you need to make sure that you remember to enjoy it. It's really easy to focus on gear and money, and I know that on here I do gear reviews, and right now I'm talking to you about how to charge money for a client. But it's important to remember why you enjoy making videos, the visual storytelling, the creativity, and it's important that that shows in the work that you do, whether it's paid or not. All right, that was long, but I'm finally done. Thank you for sticking in there if you're still there after all of this. Give it a thumbs up if you found this helpful. It was definitely helpful for me to put all of this into one delivery, into one video, and really kind of reassess how I charge clients, whether I'm doing it the right way, whether I'm completely shafting myself or not. And actually, I think having thought about it like this, I am more confident that I'm doing it the right way. All right, hit that subscribe button to get more videos from me at dodmedia. It's tips, it's tutorials for filmmaking and photography, it's gear reviews, and it's monthly giveaways. And speaking of monthly giveaways, this month I'm giving away a LUT. It's my vintage LUT for Sony cameras that you're actually seeing right now. Just head over to the link in the description and use the coupon code I stayed till the end, and you'll get that LUT for free. You're welcome. All right, leave a comment in the comment section. I'd love to know what you thought of this episode. Do you agree with how I charge clients? Do you fundamentally disagree? How do you charge clients? I'd love to know. All right, see you in the next video.